This would be helpful. Okay.
Okay, no worries.
All right. So we'll go ahead and jump in here. All right. So we will spend the next 30 minutes or so talking through, what is management consulting? And please feel free to jump in with any questions you may have.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
from your perspective, what do you think of when you think of management consulting? And all answers are accepted. There's no such thing as the wrong answer.
Yeah. Well, when I think of like management consulting, I'm thinking of helping um like a set audience and guiding them like career based. It could be any, you're just consulting, you're guiding them, giving them the tools to make maybe career decisions. Um and like setting them up for success.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, almost as if you are providing guidance to stakeholders to help them navigate ambiguous situations or challenges that they may not have the time or resources to solve on their own.
Mhm.
Okay. I agree with that. The best way to think about management consulting, I think of it as a doctor who is diagnosing and treating an illness. Okay. The same way that a doctor will diagnose and treat is the same way a consultant diagnoses and solves business problems. So when you think about it, a consultant is similar to a doctor, and here's why. If you take a look at the five-step process we have laid out here, starting with the first one of identifying the symptoms. When you think about the work a physician is doing, they have to listen to the patient or the client
Mhm.
and get a good understanding as to what the actual problem is. And that's what management consultants do as well. They listen and understand, here's what the core challenges are, and here's our understanding of what the problems are within our organization. That's what consultants use to help drive how they're going to try to solve that problem. The second step, providing a diagnosis, the doctor, they'll identify what the illness is. A management consultant, they'll analyze what the actual crux of the problem is, and they will try to develop a business case to identify how to solve that issue. The third step you see prescribing a solution. The same way a doctor will provide a medication, though that medication for a patient is a strategic recommendation for the client. The client will the client has the option to either listen to those recommendations or choose not to. Same way physicians do also.
Mhm.
And that fourth step, offering a treatment plan, think of this as the release. So when you have a when the patient is leaving, there's usually a post-discharge plan associated with what they should do after they leave the hospital, right?
Yep.
Think of this as the plan that is used to help structure how the patient should navigate once they leave
Mhm.
the doctor's guidance. That is very similar to what management consultants do when they offer implementation plans. Think of the implementation plan as directions as to one, we've told you what to do with the recommendation.
Mhm.
Now we're going to tell you how to actually carry it out. Okay. I would argue that this is the most challenging part of consulting, right? Because similar to how healthcare providers have to worry about adherence, we have to
Yeah.
worry about
Yeah.
our clients actually adhering to the recommendations that we've made, right? The last step, follow-up care. This is something that is not done too well in consulting. And I think this is the one area where healthcare may actually be ahead of the curve in terms of task related to consulting. But following up, we know that in the current state, healthcare providers have a lot of supplemental tools that enable them to check in with their progress. It's follow-up visits, It could be care coordination teams who are reaching out. It could be outreach teams that are helping and calling the pharmacy with adherence. A lot of different ways you can help and check in with your member or your patient.
Mhm.
On the management consultant side of the house, it's a little bit challenging to actually follow up unless you're actually part of the implementation plan. And what we'll learn here in a little bit is a lot of management consultants, they will provide the strategy. They don't always stay to see it through or carry out the work that's being done. Okay. And feel free to jump in anytime you have any questions regarding the content.
Anyway,
Now, when we
thank
think
you.
about what a consultant actually does, they have different roles within a firm, and the responsibilities really depend on what kind of engagement you're in. And when we think about common consulting tasks, the best way to frame this is you are doing tasks that are ultimately helping your leadership either make a decision or learn more about a certain area or topic. So the way I would break up consulting is you have your analysts and your consultants who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting to help enable your leadership to make the requisite decisions. And so, what does that work look like? It could be doing research, it could be crunching numbers in Excel, it could be conducting client interviews and getting a better understanding about the current state from the clients you're working with. So, you wear multiple different hats in that space. And the nice thing about consulting, what makes it unique, a lot of the stakeholders you're engaging with are mid-level managers, C-suite level employees as well. And so a lot of the deals and interactions you have are very strategic and operational in nature.
Just have one question.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. When you say stakeholders, is that another name for clients that you're referring to?
That's a really good question. So when I say stakeholders, I do mean the clients. Yeah, the clients will be the stakeholders, the individuals in which we are engaging with. That's a
Okay.
good question. Now, when we think about the types of projects, again, this is a little bit oversimplified. When we think about the work we do, remember we said that consultants go in and help companies solve major problems they have. And the way some of those problems they have could be strategic in nature, meaning they need help understanding how to push forward. It can be performance related. Maybe they have certain operational inefficiencies they want us to look over and help them maximize. It could be a M&A or merger and acquisition where they're looking to partner or to purchase a competitor or align with a different company for synergies. So there's a lot of different reasons why you would need consultants, and the type of projects you do vary in that same light. In terms of our responsibilities, this is a carry on from the previous slide. The responsibilities you have are going to, again, vary by the project. You can see here a lot of what we do centers around managing resources, managing stakeholders, and managing project plans. Hence the term management consulting, right? A lot of what we're doing is helping manage the situation or operations or the people. And because we are bringing structure and different avenues and pathways to optimize how you're thinking and moving forward, that's ultimately what is driving the value add of a management consultant. Now, there are two different types of consulting firms, and this again is a little bit oversimplified. But I want you to think of your larger firms, your boutique, your management consulting firms, and your more specialized consulting firms. These are your boutique roles.
Can you give me a second? I'm just having a cough fit.
Yeah, no worries.
Sorry, I'm coming off of a cold.
No, no worries. It's okay. No
Caught up
worries.
on- It caught up onto me.
Excuse me. No worries at all. Now I'm coughing. Okay, so in terms of the two types of firms, you think of your management consulting firms as your larger firms. These are the firms that will do more implementation work. They're larger in size, and they usually do all types of work under the sun. So they will do all types of services as well as all types of business functions. So in management, these management consulting firms, they'll work, they will have a healthcare group, they'll have an entertainment group, they'll have a finance group, they'll have a supply chain group, they'll have a, they'll have a technology group. Any and all industries, they have different verticals that work within them. Okay. They also have different sub-functions that work within them. So they'll have a marketing, a finance, they'll have a operations team, etc. On the boutique side of the house, think of them as focusing on just one specific vertical or one specific sub-function. The example that I use here a lot is Huron. They are a boutique consulting firm that focus in all things hospital related. So they won't do work with pharma, they won't do work with payers. They will specifically focus just on hospital operations and hospital strategy. Question for you. It's okay if you haven't heard of this term. Have you heard of the SCQA framework?
No, I have not. I'm so sorry.
Not a problem. That's what we're here to share with you. So
Can I
this
take a
is a
guess?
framework. What was that?
Can I take a guess by any chance?
Yeah,
And
go
maybe
for it. Of course. Yeah, go for it.
based on like the way it's stated, like framework, I'm assuming it's how to explain it, like a guidance, maybe like a way that we help consult companies or help consult stakeholders.
Yeah, that's a really good guess. So it is a framework that we use that helps us guide ourselves through a project or an engagement. Okay. Now, the four parts of the framework, the situation, the complication, the question, and the answer. The situation ultimately is our understanding of the current state. The complication is us identifying what the crux of the problem is. The questions, that's where we ask questions to ensure that we truly understand what the problem or the complication is. And then lastly, the answer, that's our resolution to the complication. Now, what do you think is the most important part of this framework? What section?
I would say the complication, identifying the issue.
Okay. Why is that? Why do you think that?
If you don't know what the full issue is, then you can't give a proper answer or a resolution.
That's a great way to think about it. Let's walk through a scenario and let's see what we come up with.
Okay.
So, in your IPPs, you have done MedRecs before, correct?
Yes.
So we have a patient, they're in the hospital, and they need a MedRec done. Pooja, when you go and talk to this patient and they tell you, yes, I'm taking everything on the list. Sometimes they tell you yes before you're even done asking them the question. Why don't you take what they tell you at face value and just accept what they tell you as truth?
Because it's not in. So like for example, if I ask the patient, oh, like what medications do you take at home? And they give me a list of medications, I can't go based off of that unless I have a dispense report. Something that's already like um something that's already documented. Because what a
Absolutely.
patient could be telling me, maybe they themselves don't know what medications they're taking. They can be saying a whole different type of medication than they're actually taking.
Absolutely. You need to make sure that you need to verify that what they're telling you is factual, not because we don't believe them, because that's the responsible thing to do. The same thing can be
Mhm.
said about our clients. There's been a number of times where I've gone into an engagement and the client liaison will tell me, here's what I believe is the current state or the current problem. And for us to verify that, we have to go and engage with other stakeholders. Now, in this scenario, what stakeholders or healthcare professionals would you engage with to uncover more about the med rec for this patient? Who could you go talk to learn more?
About like their maybe like past medical history and like their previous medications that they take.
More so their previous medications. Who could you go and call?
Pharmacy, I would call their pharmacy.
The
Uh,
pharmacy. Absolutely. So you call the pharmacy, the patient is unaware of what they're taking, so the pharmacy student must contact the pharmacy and or the patient's doctor for an updated medication list and fill list. When you do this, you learn that the patient has not filled their amlodipine. Pooja, you now have uncovered a problem. Would you, A, go to your preceptor and tell your preceptor, we need to change from amlodipine to lisinopril? Or B, would you go and engage with the client or patient more to learn more or to get to the crux of the actual problem?
I would choose B
Why would you not choose A? Why would you not go make an assumption about what the right answer is?
because there's no previous dispense history for lisinopril, and I like like why change their drug therapy when they're not even taking it in the beginning?
Absolutely. You don't have enough information to make a strong solution. So you have to
Mhm.
do a little bit more digging. That is the same for consulting. The reason why we interview multiple different stakeholders or different clients within the end organization is
Yeah.
because we have to make sure we have a full understanding as to what's actually happening before we can synthesize our findings and provide a recommendation.
Mhm.
Okay? And so from a question perspective, the pharmacy student must ask the patient why they're not adherent to their amlodipine. In doing that, we uncover that the patient does not have transportation to pick up their amlodipine. Pooja, what are some solutions that you could recommend now to your preceptor, now that you have a full picture?
Well, we can find ways to maybe get the medication to the patient if the patient can't get some medication. So I would come to you and be like, oh, maybe we can suggest or tell the patient that, hey, like pharmacies offer deliveries. There's also third party carriers that can, you can place your order, like ship it. They will pick up your medication, bring it to your house. There's just, and not even that, there's also programs out there that will help patients and pick them up and take them to the pharmacy and drop them back off.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so now that you have the full picture, you can now provide a stronger recommendation.
Mhm.
And so you were half right. The way that we learn about the way that we think about the SCQA framework, while all aspects are important, we really try to prioritize the complication of the question. And unlike traditional pharmacy, like I mentioned before, it is not a linear process from beginning to end. You start with A, do B, do C, do D. If you think about how the guidelines that you guys learn or that we learn as pharmacists are written, it's very linear based. If A, then do B, then C, then D. In consulting, there's an iterative process that occurs between the complication and the question.
Mhm.
That is a feedback loop that continues to go until we actually get to the crux of the actual problem. Until we get to the true problem, we cannot offer a valuable solution. And this framework is what enables management consultants to not jump the gun or to provide answers too quickly or prematurely, ultimately leading to band-aids I can't talk. Band-aids being placed over items that may actually need surgery, right?
Yeah.
If you think about, you can even look internally to your own program or different entities in which you've worked with. You've probably been in operational processes that you thought to yourself, Pooja, this is very inefficient. Why do we do things this way? The reason for that is because whenever that process is being planned out, the SCQA framework was not utilized and the crux of the problem was never actually identified. And so there can be situations where you're solving for a problem that is not actually the real problem. Let me pause there and see if you have any questions before we move on to our second framework.
Nope, no questions.
Perfect. All right. Have you heard of the pyramid principle?
No.
Okay. So the pyramid principle is, I believe, one of the most important frameworks we use as consultants because this is the principle or the framework that allows us to be structured in not just how we present, but also how we think. The pyramid principle is used as a communication technique that prioritizes information in a structured and logical way. Now, the level of detail provided increases as you go down the pyramid. Pooja, if there's anything that you take away from this call today, it's that the key takeaway is by far the most important part of a slide or a presentation. This is usually the title of that slide or presentation. Okay. If you think about it, and I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. That might be a better way to think about this. The supporting details, these are the details and data that are more in depth. These are what I believe pharmacists and pharmacy students are great at finding. These are those primary and secondary facts that are needed when you're building your presentations. Okay. The
Yeah.
summary of your supporting details provides you with a factual statement. So when you summarize, let's say we find three or four similar supporting details. When we summarize those items together, that creates a factual statement. Multiple factual statements, when summarized, create your key takeaway. The next slide will share with you why the key takeaway is the most important part of your slide. Oh, let me go back one.
Sorry.
I'll voice
Question.
that over and let you know. What, go for it. Go for it. Go with your question.
So when we're talking about key takeaway,
Mhm.
are you so this pyramid principle, is this when when I will be like making presentations or when I'm presenting something and that's like, is this what it applies to presentations or what is it?
Yeah, that's a good
Or-
question. So the pyramid principle applies to two different areas. One,
Okay,
it will apply to the way you think and do your research.
okay,
Number two, when you convert that research into a PowerPoint presentation, it'll
okay,
help you structure the way you present your information. So when you're doing your research, it's an adaptive process. As you find information, your information will start to form into these three layers, right? Once you have a solid outline of all of your information, the next step is to turn that information into a presentation. And we'll do an example of that here shortly so you can see what the entire process looks and feels like. Now, the term storyboarding is something that we don't actually realize we do every day all the time. All storyboarding is, it's a structured way for you to be organized in how you communicate your thoughts. Okay. And the way that we think about storyboarding and consulting, it is a combination of the two different frameworks we have just discussed. Horizontal storyboarding, or the SCQA framework, that is storyboarding that focuses on the entire story or the entire presentation deck as a whole. So is there a linear story that's being told throughout the entire deck? Vertical storyboarding, which is the pyramid principle, incorporates storyboarding that's told on that given slide. So every slide is going to have vertical storyboarding. That entire deck, the slides all together, they should have horizontal storyboarding as well. Okay. This concept will make a lot more sense when we go through our example. So I'm going to push forward to what the example looks and feels like. So our prompt today will be amlodipine market access, and a company wants you to assess amlodipine market access potential. Below are the supporting details that have been found, and it's your job to group the supporting details into the correct buckets. And so what you see on the left-hand side, this represents what pharmacists and pharmacy students are great at. You guys are really good at finding the facts or finding details. The problem is, if you read through these facts, there's no true alignment to them. There's no similarities. They're all over the place, right? The opportunity area for pharmacists and pharmacy students is learning how to group together your supporting details so you can tell a more compelling story. Okay? Typically, in presentations you've seen before, a pharmacist or pharm student would come to the stage and say, "We want to present amlodipine market access," and they just read these 5 points, and you'd be done. And by the third bullet point, your audience is thinking about what they're going to have for lunch because they're not paying attention, right? What consultants do, or management consultants do, is we add structure to the way that we present and that the way we have you think through different content. So again, these 5 items represent the supporting details. I want these 3 items here to represent our factual statements. Okay? So it's our job to group together our supporting details to create our factual statements. Okay? So let's go line by line. You tell me which bucket you think each one of these belong to. So amlodipine costs $6 for a 30-day script. Oh,
Um, oh,
that's cost, right? It's a cost bucket. How about 65% of patients had no complaints about amlodipine?
I would put that in side effects and tolerance.
So this one can be a little bit challenging. The keyword here is patients. This would be a patient
Oh,
preference.
patient. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was
Mhm.
because they had no complaints about amlodipine, so maybe I was like, okay, tolerance wise, it's tolerable.
Yeah, that one could go either way. I might need to update that one so it doesn't have as much confusion in it. So with amlodipine, 80% of patients have complained about the side effects of edema.
That's side effects
Side
and
effects. Lisinopril has a patient acceptance rate of 30%.
patient preference
Patient. And then lisinopril also costs $6 for a 30-day script.
cost.
That's costs. Okay, so what we've done is we've now bucketed together our supporting details to where the
Mhm.
similar items are together. Let's see what happens when we do that. So I'll do the first one. If we have to combine these two supporting details to create a factual statement for the cost bucket, that would look something like this. Amlodipine and lisinopril both cost $6 for a 30-day script. Would you agree with that? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you do the next one. How would you combine the patient preference?
Um, I would combine it as two conjunctive statements coming together. So I would say, like I would say 65% of patients like amlodipine. However, the acceptance rate for lisinopril is 30%.
That works. Yeah, that works. You could say, well, 65% of patients like amlodipine, 30% of patients like lisinopril. That works as well. Okay. And the last one that only has one of them. With amlodipine, 80% of patients have complained about the side effects of edema. Okay. So now we've created three factual statements that talk about and I misspoke before. I said that those three areas were your factual statements. Those are your three key takeaways, right?
Yeah.
Let's take a look at what you have built now that you have added some structure to your original findings. So remember, we started with these five random details that we have found through our primary and secondary research, right? But then we added some structure to our findings. Let's see what we have created. While amlodipine and lisinopril are cheap, amlodipine has a higher acceptance rate than lisinopril. However, amlodipine patients need to worry about the side effects of edema. Doesn't that sound like a sentence?
Yeah.
That sounds like a complete sentence, right?
Mhm.
Guess what this turns into?
Wouldn't this be the key takeaway from everything?
That is the key takeaway. Absolutely. Do you see how you have used structure to
Hmm.
foundationally build a key takeaway that lets your audience know what to expect before they've even looked at the page, right?
Yep.
This is the formula you should use, not just when you're creating presentations, but when you're thinking about how you're doing your research also, right?
Hmm.
Now, I'm going to call one thing out here. Management consultants, while it's our job to present information in an unbiased form, we have to be very wary about how we present our information. The rule of thumb we have in consulting is you never tell a client that they're ugly, that their baby is ugly, right?
Yeah.
And so if you think about this sentence, let's think about how it reads. While amlodipine and lisinopril are cheap, amlodipine has a higher acceptance rate than lisinopril. However, amlodipine patients need to worry about the side effects of edema. Would you say that this sentence has a negative tone to it or a positive tone to it based on how it ends?
I would say negative because it's like you have too many to
Negative.
worry about.
Absolutely, it's negative, right?
Yeah.
If we're talking about amlodipine's market access, we don't want to be biased and lie about the information.
Yeah.
We can structure our findings in which it has a more appealing case for amlodipine. So let's see what happens if we just switch around the buckets of information we've created, and let's see what unique story we can tell by doing that. And so by simply moving around those buckets, let's see what story we have now. While amlodipine patients need to worry about the side effects of edema, amlodipine and lisinopril are both cheap, but amlodipine has a higher acceptance rate than lisinopril. Do you see how we use the exact same content, but the way we moved it around tells a different story, right?
Yeah. The
So
ending.
I want you to be mindful of this as you're going through your information and as you think about how you create information that you're going to share. Okay?
Mhm.
And this is just a high level overview as to what the final page would look like. Again, this would be your key takeaway. This would be your title, right? This would be your factual statements. These would be your supporting details.
Mhm.
See how everything starts with the supporting details. So step one, do the research and find the information. Step two, group the information into like content. Step three, summarize those groups into factual statements. Step four, summarize the factual statements into a compelling story. And step five, use that story to create the key takeaway. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the pyramid principle, and I can guarantee you this is going to be the principle that you use most often throughout your time on this experience. Okay. All right. The last area that we will talk about are different ways to create an effective and aesthetically pleasing presentation. Now, I'm sure that you've seen presentations that are extremely dry, meaning there's no images, no icons, only black text, and no real umph to it that helps guide the reader along as they're presenting.
Mhm.
Just based on your experience, do you have a sense of some things that can be done to make a presentation more aesthetically pleasing?
Um, One thing that I enjoy is when there's like objectives in the beginning
Okay.
where um and I've done it in my presentations where I'll be like, okay, this is what we're gonna focus on, and I'll give objectives and I'll keep it one theme. Um, and definitely because sometimes people aren't audio learners, they're visual learners.
Yep.
So we keep pictures or tables or anything that's visual to help guide the audience.
Absolutely. So part of what we think about as management consultants, clear, concise, and engaging, right? You want your message and your content to be clear. You don't want to repeat yourself or be repetitive in areas where you can be more concise. And lastly, we want to be engaging. You want to make sure that you bring your audience along with you so you're talking with them, you're not talking at them.
Mhm.
Okay? And here are some of the best practices that we use when we think about how to make your presentations more engaging. It always starts with the title. You want to make sure that your title is clear, concise, and easy to digest. You want to make sure you're guiding the reader. That could be, pausing at certain points in the presentation, telling them to focus their eyes on a certain area, explaining to them what you want them to take away from the image or the graph or the picture. The third bucket there of adding the visuals, I would group three and four together. Any kind of visual, chart, figure, graph, all of those do a really good job of distracting your audience from the the same old text that occur on every single slide. The one thing I'll add in is any kind of visual you add in, you want to make sure that you are presenting that visual or image in a manner that shows its value and you don't just have it in there to take up space. Your visuals, charts, figures, and graphs, what part of the pyramid principle do you think that falls under? Key takeaway, factual statement, or supporting details?
Supporting details.
Absolutely. It should always be a supporting detail. You should always use the visuals, the charts, the figures, the graphs to support whatever factual statement you're making on that slide.
Mhm.
Okay? And then the last one, I think this is the most important part, and this is what brings that creativity and alertness to a PowerPoint presentation. Bring a perspective, bring an analogy. You can see that I've used two different analogies on this engagement. The first one was comparing management consultants to that of a doctor, because I know you'll be more familiar with what healthcare providers are doing, right? And the second analogy I used was comparing the SCQA framework process to that of a medrec that I know that you will have completed, right? So the more creative you can be in finding different ways to bring your audience along, the better off you'll be at keeping them engaged. The worst thing you can do is talk to an audience for 30 minutes to an hour about content they do not know anything about, not only will you lose them, you're going to ruin their confidence and they're not going to want to engage. Okay? All right. That's the end of the presentation. I like to sh close out with these 10 secrets to optimal client service. And I've picked these up along the way throughout my career, and I'll read them out to you and focus in on the ones that I think are extremely important. Well, they're all important, but I'll give you a rationale for why. So being available, being responsive, first impressions die hard. The worst thing you can do is come off immature or not put your best foot forward when engaging with the client. So that first impression is going to determine what the rest of the relationship will look like. So make sure you do a good job of putting your best foot forward there. Okay. I think you voiced this over. You mentioned that you always want to have an objective or an agenda at the beginning. I couldn't agree more. To make sure you have structure in your meetings, you should always come prepared with an agenda. The agenda is what provides guidance and structure so you're not all over the place. And a meeting that's meant for 30 minutes ends at 30 minutes. It doesn't last for an hour, hour and a half, right? Control the meeting. Now, this doesn't mean don't listen to what people are saying. This means make sure that you have a strict agenda. And if you feel that there are comments or questions that are out of scope, you table those to after the call and you'll circle back with those individuals to ensure you get to those items offline. The worst thing you can do is lose control of the meeting and have one-off conversations take you down a rabbit hole, and now you don't get to cover the reasons for the meeting in the first place. Okay? Take number four, take a position. Tell the patient or the client what to do. I was told that a client never truly trusts you until you provide them with advice that goes against your own personal gain. This one is a little bit hard to mim or to share with in the realm of patient care because we don't necessarily benefit from any decision we tell a patient to do. But in client services, a client doesn't fully trust you until you give them advice that goes against what benefits you. Okay. Number five is something that's extremely important with pharmacy students and first and second year residents. Stay away from industry jargon, right? You don't need to brag to a client or to a patient how much you know about pharmacy, right? If you come to me and tell me, Patrick, your A1C is 13. We have to make sure that your glucose is controlled. I'm looking at you like, okay, thank you for letting me know that. I may not know what any of that means, right? As opposed to you coming to me and saying, Patrick, I don't know about you, but I enjoy my sweets and I enjoy, like my candy. And when I eat a lot of that, it makes the sugars in my blood increase. And there's a test that we run to check how much sugar is in your blood. We want that score to be below an 8. This is below an 8, right? Is it 8 for
It's
A1C?
seven. Seven.
7, 7. You want to be below a 7. Your score is almost double that at 13. So you can see that there's a little bit too much sugar in your
Mhm.
tank right now. That's a very different way of sharing content than being very technical and sound with that patient. Okay. In consulting, one thing that we share internally is that you should always think of your clients, think as if you're presenting to a 7-year-old child,
Mhm.
meaning you can't make any assumptions as to what you think they know. It's better for you to err on the side of caution and over-explain than be too high in the details or to be too high level and make assumptions about what they know. A client will always tell you if they know something. They won't always tell you if they don't know something. Okay. Number six, something I need to work on myself. Pause, try to slow down. Pausing and slowing down does two things. One, it enables your client to take a second to digest what you're saying. Number two, It's a sense check for them. When there's a pause in a conversation, it automatically makes the audience perk up and ask themselves, wait, did something happen? Did I lose connection? And it keeps them more engaged. Okay.
Mhm.
I look for opportunities to give the patient advice that is genuine. This aligns with what I mentioned about number 4 about taking a position. Number 8, ask open-ended questions. The worst thing you can do is ask yes or no questions. I know this is something that you guys get a lot in pharmacy school. Always keep it open-ended.
Yeah,
Open-ended,
don't never leave the patient. Always ask open-ended questions.
absolutely. Open-ended usually gives the patient room to divulge things that you may not get if you ask closed-ended questions.
Mhm.
Number 9 and number 10 go hand in hand. Always be positive, meaning bring your best foot forward. Until you've built a rapport with the client or with the patient, you should never show up to a meeting and overshare about how your day's going or issues you're having in your personal life or things that will make the client or patient uncomfortable. At the end of the day, it's client services or it's patient services. You're there to serve the patient or the client. So until you've built that rapport, you should not bring that openness to that environment.
Mhm.
Okay. And then lastly, be humble. It's okay to say you don't know something, but it's important to make sure that you go back to number 1, that you're responsive. And if you don't know something, you get back to that client or patient in a timely manner. Okay. All right. Let me stop sharing and let me go ahead and stop the recording also.